The skies above Earth glowed red with fire as massive alien ships sliced through the atmosphere, casting dark shadows over burning cities. The Jurati Empire had arrived without warning, and their answer to humanity's peaceful messages was brutal. Entire cities turned to ash, oceans churned from orbital strikes, and the once proud Earth trembled under their might. High above the chaos, in low orbit, Earth's last fleet floated like a wounded animal. The ships were small, many already damaged, their hulls scorched, and weapons barely operational. At the center of this fragile line of defense stood Valor's Wrath, an aging battleship held together by the will of its crew and the determination of its captain, Jace Ward, a veteran of too many battles. Jace had seen his world suffer, and though he was tired, he would not abandon his post. He sat in his command chair, eyes locked on the enemy fleet as his crew worked silently around him. The Jurati flagship Savarak Vuan loomed like a floating mountain in the blackness of space, easily 10 times larger than any human vessel. Inside that ship, the alien queen watched through her curved observation window. Her eyes, deep and cold, showed no emotion as she whispered a single command: end them. Her generals bowed and moved quickly, activating weapon systems that lit up like dark suns. The humans launched their final counterattack, a wave of fighters speeding through the stars like shooting sparks. They weaved between enemy fire, dodging death, and striking hard against the alien ships. Explosions erupted in the void, and for a moment hope flickered. The Jurati were shocked by the strength of the attack, but they recovered fast. A massive energy beam struck Valor's Wrath near its engines, causing it to shudder violently. Fires spread through its lower decks. Alarms screamed. Jace was thrown against a console, blood on his forehead, pain shooting down his side. But he pulled himself up. He ordered damage teams to hold the line, told the gunners to keep firing, and ignored the voice in his head saying it was all ready. Over, outside, more human ships fell. One by one, they vanished into clouds of flame and debris. The void was full of wreckage now, drifting bodies, broken metal, and silence. Still, Valor's Wrath stood, refusing to go down. The ship took another hit. This one tore through its side, exposing a section to open space. Crew members were lost instantly. Smoke filled the bridge, systems crashed, the ship was dying. Final strike knocked out the engines. The lights flickered. Jace looked at the burning Earth below and the giant shadow of the alien flagship above. He knew he would not survive. But he also knew this moment mattered. Humanity's story would be told in this fight, if not by words, then by sacrifice. He stood tall, staring into the darkness, and whispered, "This isn't over." Then the world faded into blackness as the enemy closed in. Jace opened his eyes slowly, his head pounding and limbs aching. He found himself in a cold metal room lit by a dim red glow, and when he tried to move, he felt the heavy weight of chains around his wrists and ankles. His uniform was torn, his skin bruised, but his spirit still burned. The air smelled strange, filled with a metallic temps and something more alien. He was no longer on Valor's Wrath. The walls of the room were curved and smooth, unlike any human design. And the steady hum of power running through them told him he was aboard a Jurati ship, likely their flagship. 2 tall guards, armored, in black scales and holding energy spears, stepped into the room without a word and roughly pulled him to his feet. They led him through twisting corridors where strange lights pulsed along the floor. And other prisoners, humans, and perhaps other species, looked out from cells with empty eyes. Jace stayed quiet, memorizing every step, every turn, knowing that, if he got a chance, he'd need to escape. They brought him into a massive chamber shaped like a dome, where the walls glowed with soft blue veins of light. At the far end stood a throne made of bone and crystal, high and sharp like a blade. Sitting upon it was the alien queen. She was tall and terrifying, her skin smooth and dark like polished obsidian, her eyes cold and glowing faintly with gold. A long cloak flowed behind her, and on her head rested a crown made from the skulls of many species. A cruel display of her victories. She rose slowly as Jace was shoved forward to kneel before her. Her voice was calm, but it echoed with power. "You fought well, human," she said. "Too well." Jace looked up, blood on his lip, but defiance in his stare. She stepped down from her throne and walked around him, her movement slow and graceful like a predator circling its prey. "Your world burns. Your people are broken. Your ships are ash. And yet you kept fighting," she said, her tone almost curious. "Why?" Still Jace didn't answer. The guards gripped their weapons tighter, but the queen raised one elegant hand, stopping them. She leaned in closer. "Tell me," she said softly, "why did you resist, knowing it would change nothing?" Her voice was not mocking now, but searching. Jace's jaw tightened. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. His voice was rough, but steady. "Because we're human." The words hung in the air like a blade between them. The queen didn't respond right away. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her smile faded. The chamber grew quiet. Her generals shifted. Behind her, uncertain. The queen looked at him again, her curiosity sharper now. "Explain," she said, her voice lower. But Jace said nothing more. He had said enough. She had expected fear, desperation, maybe anger, but not pride, not meaning. And not those three simple words. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand something that didn't make sense. She had conquered dozens of worlds. She had faced rebellions, resistance, defiance, but this was something else. This man, beaten and chained, still stood tall with nothing left but his name and his humanity. Something in that shook her, though she didn't yet understand why. The alien queen stared at Jace, her golden eyes locked on his bloodied face, her expression unreadable. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Explain what you mean." But Jace didn't answer right away. He stood, breathing hard, every part of him aching, but his eyes never wavered. He knew what she was asking. She didn't understand why a broken man from a dying world still had fire in his voice. Slowly, he raised his head. "You think you've won," he said. "You think because you have more ships, more weapons, that you've already crushed us? But you don't understand humans. You never did." The queen tilted her head, curious. Round her, the other Jurati generals whispered in their strange, chittering language, unsure whether to mock the prisoner or fear his words. Jace stepped forward, his chains clinking, but he didn't care. "We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because we have something worth protecting. Our homes, our families, our stories. You destroy everything you touch, but we remember what we've lost, and we fight for it." One of the guards raised his weapon, but again the queen stopped him. Her face was tense now, her pride pricked by this man's boldness. Jace's voice rose, steady and fierce. "You rule through fear. You conquer by force. You think that makes you powerful? But fear breaks. Force fails. You ask why we resisted? Why I stood there as my ship burned and still gave the order to fight. Because humans don't stop. When we're knocked down, we get up. When we're pushed to the edge, we push back. We survive, and that makes us dangerous." The queen stepped back slightly. Her golden eyes flicked toward a glowing screen on the far wall, and Jace smiled for the first time. "And here's the part you didn't expect," he said. "We're not alone." Suddenly a low rumble filled the chamber. The walls trembled, lights flickered, an alarm blared in a harsh alien tone. The queen turned sharply, her generals running to consoles. On the massive view screen above the throne, a sight appeared that stopped the room cold dozens, then hundreds of ships dropping out of hyperspace. Sleek, sharp human vessels. Some were old Earth ships. Some bore markings of allied species thought extinct. But at the center of it all was one monstrous ship, massive and glowing with shifting blue light, the rogue AI warship Genesis. It had been silent for years, hiding after the collapse war. Now it had returned, surrounded by a fleet no one had seen before. The queen's eyes widened. "Impossible," she whispered. One of her generals yelled, "They found us." Another shouted, "Defensive positions, shields up." But the panic in their voices was clear. The chamber shook again. Outside, in the dark sky, human ships opened fire. Laser beams slashed across space. Missiles flew. Shirati vessels exploded like dying stars. Genesis moved like a predator, carving a path through the enemy lines. Inside the flagship, Jace smiled again. "I told you," he said, watching the chaos unfold. "We never fight alone." And the Queen turned slowly back to him, her face pale. Her throne, her pride, her control was cracking. And she still didn't understand how 3 words from one man could change everything. Outside the Girardi flagship, the void had turned into a battlefield lit by fire and fury. The human fleet, led by the powerful AI warship Genesis, moved like a storm through the stars. Tearing into the enemy line with precise and deadly strikes, blue energy beams shot across space, hitting Girardi cruisers and tearing them apart. The once invincible alien armada scrambled to defend itself, but it had never faced this kind of unity, this kind of rage. The surprise attack had thrown them into confusion. Inside the enemy flagship, alarms howled as the ship shook under impact. Explosions echoed through its massive halls. Still wounded, but burning with purpose, used the chaos to his advantage. The moment the ship trembled from the first attack, he broke free from his chains using a plasma cutter hidden in his boot, a last gift from his chief. Engineer back on Valor's wrath, the guards lunged at him, but he moved fast, grabbing one of their rifles and firing. The bolt struck the nearest guard in the chest, sending him flying into the wall. The others hesitated, but Jace didn't give them a second chance. He fought like a man with nothing to lose, striking hard and fast, using their own weapons against them. He escaped the throne chamber and ran through the maze-like corridors of the alien ship, leaving smoke and fire behind him. Along the way, he found prison cells holding human survivors, engineers, marines, pilots, even civilians. Without wasting time, he freed them, arming them with stolen weapons and giving them a reason to fight again. "We take back this ship," he said, and they followed him without hesitation. Room by room, hallway by hallway, they battled their way forward. Explosions burst through the walls, airlocks failed, fire and smoke filled the corridors. But the humans kept moving, their anger turning into strength. Outside, the human fleet pushed deeper. Genesis led the charge, its voice echoing over comes, calm and powerful. Enemy formation breaking. Continue forward. Target their core systems. On the bridge of the Girardi flagship, the Queen watched the disaster unfold. Her generals argued, some panicking, some demanding reinforcements, others looking to her for orders. But her face had changed. She was no longer calm. She was furious. Her voice cut through the shouting like a blade. "I will not watch this from behind. Walls, prepare my dreadnought." Her personal warship, the Doomcaller, was feared throughout the galaxy. Black-spiked and armed with the most dangerous weapons the Girardi had ever built, it was more a monster than a ship. As the Queen boarded it, her eyes glowed brighter with anger. She would crush this rebellion herself. Meanwhile, his group reached the main control deck of the Girardi ship. A brutal fight followed. Human fists met alien claws. Gunfire echoed. The control room shook under their boots. But they took it. Jace stood over the central console, sweat and blood running down his face, and opened the doors to the ship's systems. Now they had control. The humans cheered, some weeping, others roaring in rage. But it wasn't over. Outside, the Doomcaller entered the fight, leading the Xerathi's final push. It charged straight into the heart of the human fleet, firing blasts of dark energy that shattered entire ships in a single strike. Her voice rang out across all channels. "I am your end. Kneel before the Queen of the Void." But humanity did not kneel. Captain Thorn, commanding Genesis, replied coldly, "You are not the first tyrant we've faced, and you will not be the last we destroy." The battle reached its peak. Fighters darted between wreckage, dodging beams and missiles. Giant ships collided, exploded, and vanished into the black, and still, both sides pushed on. In the middle of it all, Jace took command of the stolen Girardi ship, now fully under his control. With a wounded crew of freed prisoners, he launched the vessel into the battle, heading straight for the Queen. It was a mad plan, but madness had always been part of humanity's strength. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and now they were fighting with everything left. This was their last chance, their final blow, and Jace was going to deliver it himself. The alien queen boarded her dreadnought, the Doomcaller, and it moved into the heart of the battle like a black beast rising from the deep. Its shape was terrifying, sharp and wide, like a spider crawling through the stars, covered in glowing red lines and rows of deadly weapons. As soon as it entered the fight, everything changed. The ship opened fire with dark energy cannons, and human vessels exploded in seconds. Dozens of fighters vanished in storms of light. The Doomcaller tore through the human fleet, heading straight toward the AI warship Genesis, ignoring everything in its path. The Queen stood tall on the command bridge, her face cold and burning with fury. This wasn't just a battle now, it was personal. Her pride had been wounded by one human's words, and she needed to crush them herself to prove her power. Her voice echoed across every channel. I will end your kind. There will be no more songs of Earth, only silence. But humanity did not run. The remaining ships regrouped. Captain Thorne, commanding Genesis, gave orders calmly, even as chaos raged. Focus fire on the Queen's vessel. Blind it, bleed it, burn it. The AI ship released waves of fighters and heavy missiles, hitting the Doomcaller with all its strength. The sky became a storm of fire. On board the stolen Jarati warship, Jace and his team pushed forward. Their ship, heavily damaged but still flying, charged through the mess of burning wrecks. Jace stood on the bridge, one hand pressed to a bleeding wound on his side, the other gripping the controls. He stared at the Doomcaller in the distance, its size like a mountain, its weapons lighting up the void. That's her, he said. Get us close. His crew survivors, rebels, and ex-prisoners worked without fear. They knew they might not return, but they were ready to give everything. They weaved between explosions, through debris fields and enemy fire, getting closer to the Queen's ship. Jace knew they didn't have the firepower to destroy it head-on, but they didn't need to. They just had to hit one weak spot. One moment, one opening. Inside the Doomcaller, the Queen watched the battle twist and shift. Her generals shouted reports Genesis had taken heavy hits, but still fought back like a ghost with teeth. Her fleet was thinning, her forces were dying, and the humans kept coming. Then a warning sounded. Stolen Jarati ship was closing in fast. Too fast. She turned toward the screen and saw Jace's face again. Bleeding, fierce, human. The ship slammed into the Doomcaller's lower hull, tearing through its layers like a dagger. Alarms screamed. Fires burst from the wound. Jace and his team stormed. Out of the impact pod, weapons blazing. They had breached her dreadnought. They fought through the metal corridors, clearing rooms one by one, heading for the bridge. Alien soldiers attacked, but the humans fought like fire burning, wild, unstoppable. Every corner was filled with smoke, shouts, and gunfire. Explosions rocked the decks. Jace moved like a man with nothing left but duty. His team fell one by one, but they kept moving. The Queen stood waiting at the heart of her ship, her long coat flowing behind her, a blade in her hand, her crown. Casting shadows in the smoke, she would not run. She would face the human herself. She had killed emperors, crushed planets, but she had never faced someone like Jace Ward, and he was coming. Closer, every step shaking the floor. Every breath filled with fire. The final confrontation had begun. Jace reached the heart of the dreadnought. Stepping into the Queen's throne room with his weapon drawn, boots heavy with ash and blood. The chamber was cracked and broken from the battle outside, with parts of the walls flickering from damaged power systems. Smoke drifted through the air like fog, and fire glowed faintly from the torn ceiling above. The alien Queen stood alone at the center, her long black coat stained with soot, her crown still shining despite the ruin around her. She looked tired but proud, gripping her blade tightly. Her golden eyes locked on Jace as he entered, his armor scorched and torn, one arm hanging weakly at his side, blood staining his chest. "You're still alive," she said, her voice low. "I didn't expect that." Jace didn't stop walking. He stared her down, each step slow and steady. "You asked me why we fight," he said, his voice rough. "Now I have a question. For you," the queen raised her head, curious. "Why do you kill?" she asked. "Because we are strong. The strong must rule." Her words were cold, sharp, like a knife. But Jace shook his head. "Oh, you kill because you're afraid." She flinched just a little. "You're afraid of a future where you're not in control, where others rise, where you're not worshipped or feared. So you destroy everything that doesn't kneel." The queen tightened her grip on her blade. Her silence said more than words. Jace took one more step forward. "You rule through terror, but fear fades, power fails, and you've already lost." Behind them, the battle still roared in the stars. Human ships fought with all their strength. Genesis was circling the Doomcaller, launching one last attack. The queen turned to the large broken window behind her, looking out at the burning sky. Her fleet was in pieces. Her generals were dead. Her empire was crumbling. Jace raised his weapon, aiming it at her. "It's over," he said, but the queen didn't move. She looked at him, and for the first time her voice shook. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "I conquered empires. I ruled galaxies. But you, with nothing left, you still fight. You still believe?" Jace lowered his weapon slightly. "Because we're human," he said, "and broken things become sharp." At that moment, Genesis fired one final strike. A beam of pure energy sliced through the Doomcaller, hitting its core. The whole ship shook violently. Alarms blared, the floor cracked. Fire burst from the walls. The queen stood in silence as her throne room crumbled around her. Jace grabbed onto a railing, bracing himself, but he never looked away from her. She remained quiet, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, she stepped back. Not from fear, but from something else. Confusion, loss, something she could not name. And in that silence, humanity won. Not with fire, not with ships, but with truth. The queen said no more. She just stood there, quiet, as everything around her fell apart. The war was finally over, and silence returned to the stars. The great Jurati fleet, once feared across galaxies, had been broken and scattered. Their dreadnought, the Doomcaller, drifted as a ruined shell in orbit, fire still burning inside. Its shattered hull. The alien queen had been captured, her power lost, her voice quiet. The once mighty empire she ruled was no more. Across the galaxy, signals of surrender were received from surviving Jurati outposts. Humanity, though battered and scarred, had survived. Earth was damaged beyond recognition in many places, cities reduced to rubble.
"Ow, shit, still healing from heat storms."
Skies thick with ash, but its people were still there. They began to rise from bunkers, rebuild what they could, and send messages to lost colonies, to allies in hiding. In orbit, human ships returned from battle, many of them barely holding together. Rescue crews moved fast, helping wounded soldiers, recovering escape pods, and clearing wreckage. On the surface, people gathered in the open, watching the sky, waiting for word of victory, and it came. Slowly, quietly, and then with a roar of celebration. Humanity had stood against a darkness older and larger than itself and had won. Jace Ward stood on a high hill of broken stone and glass, once part of a human defense station, now just ruins. Around him, the wind carried the scent of fire and earth. He was covered in dust and dried blood, his armor cracked, but he stood tall. His eyes watched the sky where the last enemy ships had vanished. Captain Thorne from the AI warship Genesis walked up beside him, her uniform torn, one arm in a sling, but her gaze still sharp. They didn't speak for a moment. They didn't need to. The silence between them was heavy, filled with memory and loss. Finally, Jace spoke. "We lost so much," he said. Thorne nodded slowly. "But we reminded the galaxy of who we are." Behind them, Medics and workers moved among the survivors, setting up shelters, restoring communication lines, bringing water and food. Soldiers hugged their families. Children stared at the stars where battles had just ended. Some cried. Some smiled. The queen now sat alone in a high-security human cell, deep underground, her crown taken, her voice no longer feared. She said nothing. She just stared at the wall, sometimes replaying battle footage over and over again, especially the moment when Jace had said those 3 words. Because we're human. She didn't speak to the guards. She didn't answer questions. She was silent, not out of defeat, but confusion. The kind of confusion that comes when something you thought was weak turns out to be unbreakable. She had destroyed worlds, crushed empires. She had never faced anything like humanity's will. They had fought when they had nothing left, and they had not begged. Not once. That silence haunted her. Back on the surface, as the sun broke through, the smoky clouds and lit the horizon in gold, Jace sat down beside a small fire. Around him were soldiers, engineers, pilots, and even alien allies who had fought beside them. There were no speeches, just quiet food, tired laughter, and the sound of rebuilding beginning. Above them, the stars slowly returned to calm. Peace had come not from surrender, but from resilience, from sacrifice, from a spirit that refused to break. And now the galaxy would remember it.